Greetings everyone, welcome to another one of our free Friday community classes right here on the YouTubes. I post these classes every single Friday right here on YouTube. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do so. That way you'll get a little ding every time a free class comes up and you won't miss anything. This week I am responding to a question that I've received a bunch over the last few months, which is what in the heck is green sorcery? I love talking about this topic. It's very interesting to me, and it challenges us to think in different ways about the work that we do. So I'm really excited to be talking about it with you today. So in this brief class, we're going to be talking about the intersection of the sorcerous arts and plant spirit work. That's kind of our focus here. We're going to do some definitions of terms, defining sorcery, defining plant spirit work, and then defining what happens when we mash them together into one practice. And we're going to be looking at them as expressions in practice, what they look like as the work hits the soil. And then I'm going to share a little bit about my own practice with you. And that's it. So really a definition and explanation class today, but one that I think will clarify a lot of the ways that I approach this work. So some definitions. Sorcery. The etymology of sorcery is really interesting to me. We only have written record of this work being used from about the 13th century. It started out as the Latin sors, which I think probably has some Proto-Indo-European root, but that has yet to be defined. So this 13th century Latin sors is a word that references adjusting the future, drawing lots, changing fate. And I find that very interesting because the word source then changes as we get into Old French into sorcery, right? The practice of source, and it loses its drawing of lots, fate manipulation, specific definition, and turns more into something akin to what we know now as sorcery, wizardry, the practice of the cunning arts, and that happens pretty quick. So, and then from there trickles into English and all the other, most of the other Indo-European family words. It's interesting to me because in the grand scheme of things, not a very old word, right? 13th century anchoring, as far as we know anyway, as far as linguists have been able to reconstruct it, means that we haven't been using this word very long. And I think that's interesting because the practice of sorcery is actually ancient, right? When we start unpacking what this is, you're going to say, oh, we've been doing that forever. So while it's nice to have a convenience of a word, it's important to remember that words come and go. The fads change. We see that on social media of what people, choose to call their practices and how they choose to identify as practitioners will change over time with different fads that roll in. And maybe sorcery is no different, but this is definitely the term that I have felt the most comfortable with. So the contemporary definitions of sorcery tend to come through Hollywood, right? That we think of sorcerers as specifically people working with a demon and specifically doing what gets presented as high magic or ceremonial magic, right? Lots of drama, lots of accoutrement, lots of theater, which I love. I'm here for it, right? It's not how I practice, but I love to see it. But the reality is that sorcery is quite quiet and simple in its root expression. Not to say people that are doing high magic and ceremonial magic are not practicing sorcery. They certainly can be, but it doesn't have to be one way or the other. It's in the heart, right? What's the intent, as we'll get into now. So my definition of sorcery, and this is one that I think I share with lots of contemporary people who are working sorcerous arts, is that it is magic and ritual based on relationship or kinship or allyship to non-human persons. So again, we generally think of the sorcerer as somebody who has pacts with demons or angels or these arcane spirits from these old grimoires, and that's certainly true, but it also applies to people doing the kind of work that I do, where my magical work is fueled and informed by deep personal relation to plant spirits and their protectors, right? So what sets sorcery, for me, in my definition, aside from purely ceremonial magic, purely ritual magic, even purely folk or contemporary witchcraft-informed magic, is that the relationship is incredibly important. That the sorcerer being in kinship to the spirit or spirits they are working with is the source of the power. It is not the sorcerer's own power that is seen as the end-all be-all in magic. It is not the power of the sigil or of the charm itself, but rather it's the connection, it's the mingling of the magic of the sorcerer with that of the plant spirit that creates the transformation that we seek. So this is really relationship-based, fiercely animistic, very heart-centered work. It is because we have put in the effort and the devotion to the various plant spirit individuals that we work with, and then sort of the plant spirits as a collective that allows their magic to flow into our life. And if we're honest, makes them as individual people want to work with us on those levels, right? Because we have shown up, we've put the work into the relationship, and relationships are work. And as we know with our other human friends, right? So for me, the sorceress definition is crafting magic, doing ritual, creating medicine, honoring the seasons, essentially forging harmony, creating transformation through our sorceress allyships with non-human persons. And that can take however expression it takes in your individual practice. It gets interesting when we then add that green qualifier to it, right? When I say things like plant spirit sorcery or green sorcery. So in my definition, then plant spirit work or green work is centering or focusing work with the plant spirits, right? We're now not so concerned with the goetic demons or the angels or any other particular group of non-human persons. We are centering the plant spirits, the plant people. And so when we combine those two definitions, we see that sorcery is the working of magic, the working of ritual by being in sorceress allyship with plant spirits. It's very simple, but the connotations of what's kind of folded up in that term are deep. You know, we have to understand that when we talk about green sorcery or plant spirit sorcery, that it is not prescriptive or reductive. It's not stand here and face east and say these things and draw this sigil with chalk on the ground and all this stuff will happen, right? It's not that. This is work that is based entirely on the sorcerer's willingness and effort put into relationship. That if we're not in some kind of pact, some type of connection to the green realm as a whole, the abode of the collective of the plant spirits, but also to what individual plant spirits we might be working with, whether that's plant spirit familiars or a plant that we're doing a particular working with that we've spent some time, you know, getting to know them, opening the way between us. Then it's really not sorcery, right? It's just following a spell or doing a charm and leaning into the collective energy, the collected energy that has gathered around that particular spell over the ages, and we're kind of drawing on that well of power. And that's all fine and good, and there are even aspects of that that can be wrapped up into plant lore. We see so many books on herb magic, for example, and you can open up the section to love, and the author has been like, here are 10 herbs that you can use to do love magic, right? And if you take this herb and you say the person's name 3 times and you burn the herb, then that person will think of you and come to you. This is very reductionist, very pop, prescriptive magic. And it's not to say that it won't work, because that plant spirit who's lending their magic to that ritual may make that happen. They may say, even though this person hasn't acknowledged me, they're doing the ritual and I'm going to show up and I'm going to throw them one, right? I'm going to help them out. When we talk about sorcery, what's important is that the magic is coming directly from the plant spirit, that we know that plant, that we believe and we experience that that plant is teaching us directly. They are supporting our work, that the reason why magic is happening because of that connection. So I think that is really important. So when it comes down to how this stuff looks in practice, how I experience and relate to plants has changed dramatically as I've shifted away from, where I started in my early years, in my early teens, in forms of magic and witchcraft, and even some forms of pagan ritual have changed dramatically as I've stepped more into these spaces of sorcery where putting the work into the relationship has what's become important to me, right? Knowing the plants that I work with really, really intimately, really well, instead of being concerned with trying to memorize 100 magical herbs and, having somebody say, oh, I feel like I need protection, and me being able to rattle off 10 herbs. These are 10 herbs that are good for protection. You can use these herbs for protection. Shifting my perspective into maybe having a close relationship with 10 herbs total, but being in such deep rapport with those herbs that I can call on those friends, call on those allies to show up and help me or help my clients or my friends when they need support, so that I have friends from the green realm that I can call in a favor through the medium of my magical working and say, hey, this person needs protection. This is who I'm going to call on from my collection, my grouping of plant spirit kin. So, it's very important. And we also find that those reductionist models of, this herb is good for this magic, or you can use this herb in a spell to get what you want. It's fundamentally anti-animistic, right? We're not honoring the person of the plant when we think that way. We're not considering that plant is a sovereign being, is a person, and when we talk about plants, a very powerful person, right? That is rooted in the cosmic and fruited in our world. We're reducing them to tools or powers or energies that we can use. It is a system of human exceptionalism where all the things and all the people that exist are here to serve us, to make our lives better, and that's just not the way it works. When we start finding ourselves slipping into these patterns of thinking about how we can use an animal totem or use an herb to get what we want to serve us without acknowledging the sovereignty, the personhood of that spirit, and that they are wise and conscious and aware of communication, we're not only losing the opportunity to learn directly from an archaic, non-human spirit, which should be the focus of our work, we're also participating in these systems and structures of supremacy and of human exceptionalism. And as we see by looking around the world that we live in today, it doesn't work, right? So take the time to forge the relationships. It's worth it, and the plants respond to people who make offerings to them, who invest in studying them, who invest in sitting with them and experiencing them. They respond to us in a different way. The person who cracks open the herb magic book and does the charm, they still may get exactly what they ask for, right? But those who do it from the perspective of the sorceress arts, through a perspective of relationship and respect and reciprocity, is unfold in a different way. It turns from a band-aid fix in an herb magic book to a holistic transformation of the life in support of moving the person further into states of harmony, which reconciles the issue at hand, but also gets down to the root of how that issue manifested in the first place. The plants can work with that on that level. So for me, when I work magic, it is based on invocation. It is based on calling the plant spirit into my work through the medium of the dried plant material or their incense or a tincture or a fetish or whatever it is that I'm working with. It is making offerings to them. It is making praise to them, as we have always done, honoring them as person and calling them into the work and asking them to mingle their magic with my own in the working that I'm doing. And again, it transforms dramatically what's possible in our work with the plant spirits on a magical level. Similarly, in the rituals that I do, when the plant spirits are invoked, even if I am with them in person as they grow in the ground, there is still an invocation, an invitation asking them to be present in the space, just as I would invite or invoke a deity, right? Or another human, to invoke or invite them to come to my house for a party, right? We're respecting them on that level. And it changes things, changes the way that things go. I've also experienced that having my spiritual path informed directly by the plant spirits, by treating them as the people that they are and opening up myself to those layers of communication, means that I get direct feedback from these big personalities. They get to teach me and inspire me and bring me synchronicity and revelation and green gnosis and dreams, all things that I would miss if I reduced them down to tools that can be used in my magic for me to get what I want, right? So for me, having mentors, teachers, initiators of the green realm informing my path is more valuable to me than anything else. I never feel alone, and I never feel like I don't have friends on the other side that I can turn to when I have a spiritual block, or I'm trying to figure something out, or I want to know what the next step is for me. So these relationships are crucial, and they're enjoyable. They are a lot of work, but it's so enjoyable to do the work. So regardless of where you are starting or how you're engaged, thinking in terms of green sorcery, plant spirit sorcery, is an invitation to practice sorcery, to practice relationship-based magic, pact-based magic, kinship-based magic, and to participate intentionally and consciously in sacred reciprocity, where everything that the plant spirits give us through our magical workings is returned by the cycle of gifting, of honor, of devotion, of gifting, however you want to look at it, and that it kickstarts that gifting cycle between us and our plants, and then we are in a relationship. We are in a relationship of sacred reciprocity, of sacred kinship, and that's what we want, right? We want friends in the green realm informing our practice. So hopefully that definition makes sense to you and helps you understand more about the work that I do and the approach that I take, and maybe will inspire you to get a little more buddy-buddy with the plants that you work with, and to let the fullness of their virtues flow into your practice rather than just the lists of what they're good for flow into your practice. You will find that everything changes. If you're interested in this and you want access to monthly advanced classes, guided, facilitated plant spirit journeys that start every new moon, our moving courses into spiritual herbalism, there's a link below down to our Patreon. Come hang out. It's an incredible group of people. We're making lots of beautiful magic together. I'd love to see you there. Until next week, peace and plenty. Thanks for being here.